Training.com, CWI prep course. Come visit us at our website at train-eng.com, pronounced training. This is our CWI prep course. This is as you go through some of these videos, these will be some snippets or samples out of our online training course. If you like what you see here in the sample section, come and visit us and take the course. Our CWI CWE online Part A video course, $149. It's self-study CWI exam. Everything's an online video course. Material Safety Data Sheets, MSDSs, Module 2, Part 2. Learning Objectives. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standards, Material Safety Data Sheet, MSDSs, Welding Consumables MSDSs, MSDSs Consumer Products Exemption, Written Program Availability, Employee Information and Training, Health Hazard Definitions. That's what we're going to work our way through. MSDSs and pretty much everything you need to know about them or should know about them as a welding inspector. And once again, we get back to the OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard. It's to ensure that employers and employees know about work hazards and how to protect themselves so that the incidence of illness and injuries due to hazardous chemicals is reduced. You got the Hazard Communication Program, Container Labeling, and Material Safety Data Sheet. Material Safety Data Sheets, MSDSs. If you've been in industry any appreciable amount of time, you've probably run across one of these guys. What is an MSDS and why do we need it? Well, a material safety data sheet is an important component of product safety and occupational safety and health. The MSDS is a document that is used to provide workers and emergency personnel with procedures for handling or working with a particular substance in a safe manner. The MSDS includes information for that product, including physical data, melting point, boiling point, flash point, etc., toxicity, health effects, first aid, reactivity, storage, disposal, protective equipment, and spill handling procedures. It's just a sheet that tells you what's in this. You know, if you get something in a bottle, a jar, a can, it just tells you, this material safety data sheet just tells you what that is, what that substance is, and what can happen to it. If you spill it, this is what's going to happen. If it catches on fire, this is what's going to happen. It tells you what the melting point is, the boiling point, the flash point, how toxic it is. Maybe it isn't even toxic at all. I've seen material safety data sheets for water, like distilled water. You know, toxicity, none. Health effects, pretty much none. But they put it all on there, you know, let you know exactly what it is. They follow a set format. And there's multiple formats for this. There isn't one that is mandated that you have to follow if you produce something. You just have to produce one. And most manufacturing facilities of any size have a place where they store the material safety data sheets. Usually it's the safety office where they keep all these documents and they have a file folder. And then if you bring anything new onto the site, you've got to supply them with a material safety data sheet so that they can add it to their archive of things that they have on site. So if there's any fires or any issues or there's any emergencies, you know what you're dealing with. Before any work begins, you should read the MSDS. Before any work starts, the workers must always read and understand the instructions the manufacturers provide on a safe practices for the material and equipment and the material safety data sheets. Manufacturers of welding consumables must, upon request, furnish a material safety data sheet that identifies materials present in their products that have hazardous properties. The MSDS gives the user the OSHA permissible exposure limits. This value is the threshold limit value, as well as any other types of exposure limit used or given by the manufacturer. Welding consumable MSDSs. The MSDSs have crucial information concerning the ingredients comprising the welding electrodes, rods, and fluxes. MSDS sheets also contain information on the composition of fumes generated and other hazards that may come from the use of the electrodes, rods, and fluxes. The MSDS provides methods to be followed to protect the welder and others from fumes generated and other hazards. So this is just telling us that sometimes there are some nasty things in weld rods, and we probably don't want to be breathing the smoke and fumes that are generated when you're depositing weld metal into a weld joint. So just need to be cognizant of that, and if there's any questions, read the MSDSs. MSDS Consumer Product Exemption. Any consumer product as defined by the Consumer Product Safety Act where used in the workplace for the purpose intended, exposure within the range that could be reasonably experienced by consumers when used for the intended purpose. Examples of this would be like trash bags, sand, gravel, chalk for chalkboards, these types of items. But if there's any question, ask your safety person and the person that takes care of your material safety data sheets. They can give you a better answer on what needs an MSDS and what doesn't. Written program availability. So the law says that if you're working with some nasty stuff, the employer needs to make that available to you, or to your representatives if you're in a union shop or some kind of collective bargaining agreement. Program may be kept at a main location, but the employer has to make the written program available to you as an employee. They can't hide what you're working with or hide the materials or any of that. It's your right to know what you're working with and how nasty it is or how benign. So, something to think about. Information contained on an MSDS. How must chemicals be labeled? Containers of hazardous chemicals entering the workplace must be labeled with identity of the chemical, appropriate hazard warnings, message, picture, or symbol, hazard of chemicals, target organs affected, must be legible in English, may have other languages. Note, legible in English and may have other languages. So if it's got Spanish on there, it's not against the rules. But in the United States, you have to have English, and if you want to tack on another language, Spanish, French, Inuit, Athabascan, whatever, you can have it on there. It's not against the rules to put other information on there. Name and address of the responsible party. Material safety data sheets must be in English and include specific chemical identity and common names. Must provide information about the following: physical and chemical characteristics, health effects, exposure limits, physical hazards such as fire and explosion, health hazards such as signs of exposure, routes of exposure, precautions for safe handling and use, emergency and first aid procedures, control measures, carcinogenicity, cancer causing, identification, name, address, and telephone number of the organization responsible for preparing the sheet, and must be readily accessible to employees in their work areas. That word carcinogenicity, it took me about 3 tries to get that one. I don't even know if I got it right. Anyways, this is all the material that is included on a material safety data sheet. So that if, for God forbid, somebody drank some or whatever, ingested some for some weird accident, you'd know exactly what it was. Or if somebody got knocked into a tub of something or got some spilled on themselves, you'd have all the information to be able to address any health issues that might arise from such an instance. Employee information and training. Employees must be provided information and training on hazardous chemicals in their work area at the time of their initial assignment, whenever a new physical or health hazard is introduced into their work area, and it may cover categories of hazards or individual chemicals. Employee information. Employers must inform employees of training requirements of this section, operations in their work area where hazardous chemicals are present, and the location and availability of written hazard communication program. What must employee training contain? Program. Explanation of the HazCom program, including information on labels, MSDSs, and how to obtain and use available hazard information. Physical and health hazards of chemicals. Protection. Protective measures such as engineering controls, work practices, and the use of PPE. Personal protective equipment. Detection. How to detect the presence or release of a hazardous chemical using monitoring devices, observation, or smell. Health hazard definitions. Acute, rapid effects as a result of short-term exposure of short duration. Chronic, effects as a result of long-term exposure of long duration. Corrosive, visible, destructive, or irreversible damage to body tissue, including acids and caustics, bases. Acute, that's just if you get a whiff of something and it knocks you out or has some effect due to a short-term, short-duration exposure. Chronic, let's say you've been going to work for 30 years and you get a little bit of whiff of this stuff and there's something going wrong with, there's some kind of effect due to this long-term exposure, that's chronic. Corrosive, that's like you dip your hand into some liquid and you pull it back and there's no flesh on it. That would be considered destructive or irreversible damage to body tissue. Okay, in this one we covered OSHA hazard communication standards, material safety data sheets, welding consumables, MSDSs, MSDS consumer product exemptions, written program availability, employee information and training, health hazard definitions. Unlike a lot of other programs, we've got it set up so that you can do it a la carte. If you only need to, we've got different parts of the CWI course broken out. So if you don't need to sit through and take safe practices for welding inspectors, or you have some strengths that you know of and you want to streamline the process and only hit the sections where you don't really have a strong background or a great deal of proficiency, our program is set up so you can take some of these parts of the CWI online course a la carte. Pick and choose, put together what you want. Leave the rest, like a Chinese food buffet. We've got one section where it's questions, and more questions. We've got a whole number of CWI self-study question bank, $40. Come on in, take it, take a look, see. If you just need questions, if you sat through another course and you just want to keep hitting the material, check out our question bank, $40.